Good evening. Today is November 5th, Tuesday, and it's the Villa Park Traffic and Safety Commission. And we have roll call.
Cuthbertson,
Yes.
Di Tomaso,
Yes.
Flaskamp, Little,
Present.
McMurray, Carl Timmerman,
Here.
Karen Timmerman, Wagner,
Here.
Chairperson Pincos.
Here. Okay, going on to item 3, amendments to agenda. Anybody have any comments on amendments? Okay, we'll move on to item number 4, public comments on agenda items. Donna? Yes. Just to remind you that we're going to give you 3 minutes, so,
I'll be within 3 minutes, believe me.
okay, thank you very much.
I sent traffic and safety. I don't know if everyone got the pictures of what I had seen in front of the Mac Center. If we get blinking lights, that's just added sprinkles to the whole situation. And I also thought of, when I saw pictures of the recreation center, of thinking of having one on the west end of where the Union's going to be crossing Wildwood to go to the rec center. I don't know if we buy more in a group, if we get a discount, but that's up and coming in January too.
Okay.
But I did send the pictures, and I did have an episode, my husband was driving, we were talking about how bad it was, and he was driving, and I took the pictures, and there was a family crossing there. Luckily, they must have been Villa Park residents. People actually stopped as if there was a crosswalk there to let a family cross.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Obviously, there's no other people here for talking about public comments on agenda items. We're going to move on to item 5, public comments on non-agenda items, and we have nobody here for that. So we'll move right on to 6, the report of Bike, Pedestrians, and Transit Subcommittee. Bob?
Thank you, Chairman Pincos. The Bike, Pedestrian, and Transit Subcommittee met on October 24th at 6 p.m. Just some salient parts of our meeting. We discussed the village's parking mandates with respect to bike parking and vehicle parking, and as it relates to the study that was made for the 2 business areas. And the subcommittee made a recommendation to modify section 7.2, 7.5.2, and 7.4, and to pass those recommendations along to staff and also to the community development director as a recommendation to change. We discussed our 2025 goals, one of which is to focus on mapping and publicizing our bicycle and pedestrian networks. There was some discussion about a program that Active Transportation Alliance is promoting. It's called Project Sidewalk, and it's a program where ordinary citizens can help map sidewalk issues within the community. And there's also a mini grant available for communities that want to participate. And I think Kevin could correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but the staff felt that there was not a lot, you didn't think there was a lot of value in Project Sidewalk.
Yeah, I guess just to clarify that, we had concerns that there were too many issues with it to consider using it for official purposes. I could go into more detail if there's a desire for that.
Okay. And
Although I did have actually, it might not be the appropriate time, but you had mentioned the grant, the email mentioned the grant. would be helpful for us to get more information about what that entails and what the requirements are.
Okay.
That was the one thing that was still unknown with regard to Project Sidewalk, was the potential financial benefit from it.
Yeah, so I got an update on it, and our chairperson, Alan Leishman, I could forward that to you as well. More details about the mini grant.
Okay.
There was discussion about the Villa Avenue Improvement Project, what the timing will be for that, and staff through Vasily gave us some answers that the start to engineering or phase one probably wouldn't start till 2026, and probably the project wouldn't start until 2027.
I apologize, we're talking about Villa here?
The Villa Avenue Improvement Project.
So it's already under phase one now.
It is.
We're actually finally, after months of IDOT hurdles.
Okay.
We finally cleared the ones that were holding us up the most. Moving forward towards the end of phase one, there will still be another public meeting.
Right.
Hopefully sometime in the first half of 2025. That's contingent upon IDOT getting back to us on certain things. But as of right now, we have finally moved past the hurdles that were there before. Now,
I see.
we
Okay.
do still have a substantial time to complete phase two, but I believe the answer was that it would be 2026 for construction at the earliest, and that is still unfortunately accurate.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Bob.
And our next meeting will be Thursday, November 21st, because the fourth Thursday obviously conflicts with Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that moves us on to item number 7, approval of the minutes of October 1st, 2024.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay. Moving on to old business. We're going to item number 900, parking restrictions on Princeton, south of Belden. Do we have any more comments about that?
What is it we want to do here?
Well, it's a question in reference to, do we put any parking signs up on this little location? Or do we just leave it alone? I don't believe we've had any more, I think we had the invitation out for the residents to come if they wanted to. Am I correct, Kevin?
To one of the previous meetings that did have one resident in attendance in person and one provide email comments.
Question.
Yes.
Was this, I know we tried to communicate with all the residents. Was this just an isolated with one or two residents situation, or was this general consensus of all the residents? Do we,
My recollection
Speaking
is
as
one.
staff, it initiated with one resident concern.
okay.
We also, as I said, received obviously an email prior to the meeting that was advertised with comments that were read into the record. I believe other commissioners have mentioned that they visited and maybe even spoke with some residents. I don't want to speak to those encounters, but if there are any commissioners who would like to recount those.
I did speak to a gentleman who lived basically on the corner of the street, and he felt there was no need for anything to be done. Although I do have a concern that the lady that did come to talk to us about it, with people driving on her lawn, that's not called for. But what can we do? Put signs up that say private property or something like that? I don't think that's in our purview.
Well, we could make the west side of the street no parking, but realistically, I don't know.
Well, the west side or the east side are you talking about?
They were asking for the
The
east
east side is
side.
mostly a parking lot.
It is, but the comment on the record from the resident is that she wanted no parking signs on the east side.
Right,
Which would be where all the houses are.
but like 80% of the east side is a parking lot.
It's parking lot. I know,
East side is a
So-
parking lot.
right.
Can't park in the
Well,
parking.
the east side of the park, but the east side of the street is where the residences are.
No, west
On
side
the
of the
west.
street.
The
They're on
west
the
side
west
of the
side.
street is where the residences are.
Gosh, I must have been turned around,
And
because,
that's also where the fire hydrants are, is on the west side of the street.
And that
So
should be no parking,
I would think so.
based on what's been done in the rest of the town.
It just happens to be that way, but remember, there is no ordinance about that.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. Well, for the most part, most of the town.
You are
Where the
correct.
water mains are, which is where the fire hydrants are no parking.
You are correct.
But, you know, the other thing I thought about is that the way that that parking area is situated, it's a narrow street, and if you have people parked on the west side of the street and in that parking lot, not only is it potentially difficult for emergency vehicles to get through, but it would also be problematic for cars backing out of that parking lot. Because it is a narrow street, so.
It is very narrow.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So, I mean, it's not impossible, but it's a little bit more complicated than normal. And I don't think it would be a hardship to the residents since that cross-street parking is already there for them. So if they needed to have more guests than their driveway accommodated, 99 times out of 100, that lot is empty.
Assuming that they don't need to use it when there's a function going on in the park.
Yeah, but that's relatively,
Well, it's,
Fair.
it's a question though,
yeah.
I mean, I think that if they live across the park, they, in my opinion, I'd schedule things away from that if
Right.
I could.
But if we do not do anything, people are parking on the west side of the street anyway. So if it's a matter of an event going on at the park, that west side of the street is gonna be full, thwarting their guests' ability to park on that side anyway.
Well, something that comes to mind with me is enforcement. If we put the signage up and then we have to enforce it, it's gonna be tickets, complaints, or whatever. Or if we put the signs up and it's not enforced, then it'll be ignored.
How many have been able to be there when there has been an event that seems to be,
Not me.
I have not caught an event
I
since.
haven't either.
and
I was there when there was an event, however, it was a rainy day. So, a lot of people probably didn't stick around, and there weren't a lot of people in their cars. There weren't that many cars, so hard to say.
My kids do soccer, so I've been there for several springs worth of soccer games. And people are, the spaces in the lots are full and people are parked on both sides of the street. And the spaces in the lot on the other side of Twin Lakes Park are also full because they're using 2 soccer fields at the same time, and during the spring, there's also baseball games going on. So just park in the other parking lot on the opposite side of the street is not a functional answer. But again, there's tons of on-street parking, so I don't think that there's a hardship to saying you can't park on one side of the street, on any street in town, if you are capable of coming to a soccer game and walking across the park to be able to witness the soccer game. Your family can drop you off at the entrance of the park and park the car a block away, and, I think most people are capable of walking a block. And I'm sure that there is handicap designated parking in the park, in the lots as well, so,
There has to be.
right, that's a rule.
Bob, comment?
Yeah, just a question. So we had this limited time frame when soccer games were going to be played. Is there a spring soccer season,
Yes, there's both a spring and a fall soccer season.
spring and fall? It seems like the problem occurs when there's soccer's going on, and it's very limited, so I don't know. I went there, but whatever soccer that was going on had ended, so.
When I was there was spots available on that designated parking area. And that, but again, it was raining that day.
Were there anybody parking on the other side of the street?
I've been there several times. I've not seen anybody parking on the west side of the street. So I would almost think that if we were to make the west side no parking it would have minimal effect on the residents.
Well,
It's kind of a
we,
coin.
we have 6 houses there, and we had 2 people complain out of the 6 houses, I would assume. That's from my,
It's currently 6 houses, but there's 2 more coming in, right?
there are 2 more coming in, and with that, they are, I believe, in the last meeting, it was said that they're improving that road further,
The builder.
at the
is-
dead end, yeah, to accommodate, and it's gonna be widened out, so to
At that
accommodate.
side, so that'd be past the designated parking area.
Well, I think they're gonna widen out on both sides of that road, am I correct, Kevin?
It'd be the right-of-way in front of those 2 parcels that are being developed would have the pavement basically increased in width from what's currently effectively a private driveway to be roughly the same width as the rest of Princeton Avenue.
Just, kind of off subject, but are they putting in sidewalks as well?
I don't believe so, but I would need to get an answer on that.
Because I was under the understanding if you built a new home in Villa Park, you were required to put in a sidewalk.
There are exceptions to that, though, so I would need to look into whether or not the specific location is.
Okay.
There's no village sidewalks.
There's no
there now.
sidewalks there now, no.
So I would
but-
assume they wouldn't have to put them in.
I know somebody built a house on Madison on the south side where there is no sidewalk. When he built his house, he was required to put in a sidewalk.
Even though there was a, okay.
Actually, a former member of this commission.
Well,
I would like to make a decision so that we can take it off the agenda. To me, it feels the problem is limited to days that there are soccer games. Even on times when there are soccer practices, it's not a problem. So I feel like it isn't that big of a deal. The problem is not widespread. I understand we've had 2 residents complain, and so I'm happy to put in no parking signs on one side of the street as a response to that. But I also am fine with just saying, like, the problem is fairly limited. But, like, I'd like us to make a decision.
I agree 100% with you.
So who's got really strong feelings
Why don't you make
about
the
what we
motion?
should do?
Why don't you make the motion?
All right, great. I move that we put in no parking signs on the west side of Princeton, south of Belden.
I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? I'm a nay. So,
With that, could I ask for a roll call vote?
okay, roll call.
Cuthbertson,
Yes.
D. Tomaso,
Yes.
Little,
Yes?
Carl Timmerman,
Yes.
Wagner,
Yes,
Chairperson Pinkos.
Nay.
Motion carries.
Okay. So we will remove that item off of the, close that item.
On a side note,
Sorry, just point of order, I was under the impression that the motion was to add no parking signs, which requires a recommendation from the commission to
Okay.
the village board.
right,
It would be up to the commission as to whether it stays on until the board considers that recommendation, or to simply go ahead and take it off, but a separate motion would be needed to remove it from the agenda.
And in the past, you're correct. We should just leave it on until the board does
what it's gonna do.
what their final decision would be.
On a side note, I'd like to recommend that the Parks Department look at the parking for that park and especially this area and determine if it's in need of change. I don't know if that requires.
I can pass that along.
but
I do have a question. Is this going to be full-time, no parking, period, or is this going to be a time limit type, no parking? So say something like between the hours of 8 AM to 6 PM or 7 PM? Or do we just close it, make it just no parking totally on that one side?
That's kind of what I feel it should be.
Most streets in Villa Park have no parking on one side of the street
all the time.
all the
All the
time.
time? I mean, just asking that question.
I understand why you're asking that. It makes sense to ask that question.
Good question.
But in my opinion, as Trish says, most streets in Villa Park have no parking continuously on one side. Around the train station, it's a little bit different, and understandably so.
Sure.
I don't see that there's a time element involved. If there were, it would only have to be done during soccer games. And I don't think we want to go there.
Go ahead.
Yes, I feel that, yeah, full-time, no parking also, because if we make exceptions on times, we're gonna actually,
It's gonna
basically,
complicate.
yeah, we're gonna set a precedence for other people in other areas. Well, I want parking from these hours also, and then we start a whole new can of worms.
No problem. Just want to make sure I understand.
Just another point of order from me, if I could. In the past, in these situations, staff has typically drafted an ordinance to bring to the commission for another review and a formal vote. Not to extend this item any longer than has already been on the agenda, but that would typically be the past procedure.
Well, we're coming up on winter, so it's not like this has to be done tomorrow. So,
So just something for the commission's consideration. And I guess perhaps for feedback from me is whether the commission would like to see that draft ordinance prior to its submittal to the board for consideration.
I would.
I would as well.
same here.
Okay.
Okay.
Give us the opportunity to look it over, and that's our job, to see if there's something in there that shouldn't be or should be.
Okay.
Okay. So realistically, then we'll see that at our next meeting.
I think that's easy enough. This is a fairly straightforward one.
Okay.
But we can get it off our plate then.
Well, it's moving that way.
Well, right.
Okay, moving on to item 902, stop signs at Elm and Princeton. Discussion.
Do we have any new information?
Yeah, I can offer that the commission discussed at the last meeting that staff would look into the level of effort or the cost that would be required for stop sign warrant studies, technically referred to as, I believe, all stop control intersection warrants. We believe that they would cost somewhere in the order of $2,000 per intersection. Obviously, things have gone up in cost since the last time these were done. It's been a while since anything similar to this was completed. We did look into the suggestion that there was a prior stop sign warrant study a few years back on a mirror intersection on the east side of Ardmore. Unfortunately, we couldn't confirm that that was the case. I don't know if there was discussion at the commission to not move forward with it or what happened, but if there was a warrant study, we can't find any evidence of that.
I'm sorry, what was the cost again?
Roughly $2,000 per intersection. Well, and obviously there would be a bulk pricing if we were to look at more than one intersection, since there was conversation on that. What I would, though, like to propose is that staff believes that we could internally complete at least preliminary warrant studies for these two intersections, that being Elm and Princeton and Division and Princeton.
How would you do that, with a counter or something like that?
Well, so there are 5 warrant criteria under these studies. Traffic volume is one of them. That would typically be accomplished by putting traffic counters out there for the recommended amount of time. Obviously, the data that comes back from those would be considered. Crash history, which I'll get to that in a second. Visibility, which that's fairly easily documented. Fourth one is something that is not really a consideration for us, which is that they can be used as temporary temporary traffic control measures where a traffic control signal has already been identified as being needed. And then there's sort of a catch-all fifth warrant for other circumstances, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation in the MUTCD.
May I question you on that? Room for interpretation.
I don't know how else to describe that. The thing that was the greatest hurdle for staff on these in the past was the traffic crash history. I've mentioned to the commission before that combing through and gathering crash reports for a specific location is extremely difficult. Thanks, however, to ECC and BPT committee member Alan Leishman, we were made aware of another resource that's out there for those that has now made that process much, much easier for us. There's some issues with the data that came from it, but we can work through those issues much more quickly than we can comb through the IDOT safety portal, which is the official repository for that information. So we feel that we now have enough resources to complete these residential intersection warrant studies in-house ourselves. So we would ask that before we consider spending the money for the intersection warrant studies, we take that effort. If the commission agrees with our findings, so be it. We can move on based on those findings. If there's a question as to whether or not our methodology was acceptable, there can be a conversation about reaching out to a consultant to actually pay for a consultant to conduct third-party research here. But just something for the commission's consideration.
So are you saying you will be doing all 5 of those, or just
We would-
taking a selection of a couple of them?
We would like to conduct the two intersections that were called into question, Elm and Princeton and Division and Princeton, since those were the 2 that were brought up at the meeting.
Okay, but I meant, you follow all 5 of those categories that you just described in reference to the traffic study and
Yeah, I would envision basically a report from staff or a memo from staff that outlines the 5 criteria and then provides the response or the backup documentation.
for all 5 of them?
Yeah, obviously, one of them will be immaterial. The report would simply state that it's not a consideration in this instance.
And is there any of them that would sit there and might have the speed, like when you do the traffic count, does that pick up speed?
Our counters do pick up speeds.
And that would be included in that?
The data would be. That's not something that can be considered, though, with regard to the warrant study itself.
Okay.
Kevin, if I may ask, if we do this in-house, as you're suggesting, from a legal standpoint, how will that stand up?
I think the bottom line here in these instances where the MUTCD requires a warrant study be completed is that you have to be able to provide articulable information supporting the decision that was made.
And it doesn't matter what the source of the information is.
I would say no. It's very common, actually, for municipalities to do this themselves, in particular larger municipalities. They have larger staffs. It's not something we've typically been able to bear the burden of in the past. Again, I mentioned that's changed considerably now. If the commission is worried about it holding up, then that would always be the option of going to a consultant.
Agreed. I feel good about that, but I wanted to know if in precedent that this is something that has held up in the past in terms of, say, village liability.
My understanding is that there was a point in history where village engineering staff used to do these in-house. They got away from that. We got away from that for whatever reason, but I'm just suggesting that this would be an alternative to spending what could be, between $2,000 and $5,000.
In that case, I'm for it.
And if it warrants it, then do we have to have another study from another engineering firm to the official warrant study?
This could serve as an official warrant study.
Okay.
So I would leave it to the commission's determination as to whether there's comfort with using the staff-created studies to move forward one way or the other, or again, if there's a desire to seek a third party to weigh in.
Well, as Kevin's explaining, I'm thinking that once we get this information, we can decide to make a recommendation or not. And at that point, we can say, well, maybe we should get this warrant study, or we pass it along the board and let them make the decision.
Correct. Okay, just wanted to make sure I'm following.
That's what I think, anyway.
Bob?
Let's say, for example, we want to go to the next step. Let's say we're not able to do the in-house. Who would we use? Is that KLOA?
I would say KLOA is typically our go-to firm. They're fairly, they are well regarded in the industry and widely used for this purpose. There are other firms that complete the same efforts, though. It's pretty common across the board.
So do you need a motion for the staff to be able to go ahead and look at this in-house, or is it something that we can just?
Order.
I don't believe any formal action by the commission is needed. I am simply seeking direction here, verbal direction. And if the commission is generally agreeable to the idea that staff move forward and provide results and then make the decision from there, that would be acceptable.
Joey?
I got a couple of questions. First of all, is staff actually recommending that we consider this?
We're recommending that if the commission wants to move forward with an all-stop control warrant study, that you first allow us to conduct one in-house before spending money on an external one.
But do you think there's a need here?
My initial thought with regard to the intersection of Elm and Princeton, just looking at the preliminary data, there is probably not going to be enough to support an all-way stop control there.
And division?
Division, too early to tell.
Subject.
Division, I'll be honest, surprised me in terms of the number of crash reports there. The MUTCD criteria are very particular as to the time frame of the crash reports. It has to be, please don't quote me on this, I think it's 5 within the immediate 12 months or 6 within the immediate 36 months. There are more than 6 at the intersection of Division and Princeton over the last 12 years, but we've not dug into the details to find out what the actual dates on those were. As far as traffic volumes, I think it's unlikely that either intersection would meet the warrants based on traffic volume. The visibility question is not something we've looked at yet, so that's also fairly easily determined, though.
I've got two big concerns with putting stop sign at either of these, and I know we're not on the next one yet, but why we covered it. I have two concerns with both of these intersections. One is that it's so close to Ardmore that I don't know that the distance is enough to justify it. And the second problem I have is that if we end up doing this, what about all the remaining streets? Are we gonna end up with 6 stop signs down Elm? Because I would assume people are gonna come in and go, well, you put one down here, put one over here now, because some kid almost got hit. You know, I mean,
Well, I believe this is why we were trying to do these in-house studies to determine if it warrants us to look into this deeper than what it is.
oh, no, I understand
But
that.
I mean, let's get to that point there, and then we'll figure out what we're doing next, is what I'm thinking.
If I may add, stop signs are not necessarily the best thing to slow down traffic. And I get the fact that people use Elm to skirt traffic on St. Charles quite a bit, and I could see people being reckless over there, for lack of a better word. There are other means to control traffic. And let's wait and see what the warrant study says, and we can look into that. There's many options we can do. We could put lineage out there that makes the street appear narrower. It could be that simple.
And I do believe that MUTCD standards say you can't use stop signs as speed control.
Oh, I'm not suggesting that whatsoever.
So,
That never crossed my mind.
Well, you're not advocating stop signs anyway. You're just worried about if they do go in there, what kind of can of worms is that gonna open up? Is that what you're getting
That's
at?
my concern. I don't know that I have a strong opinion as to the stop sign one way or the other. But my concern is, like you said, opening a can of worms, causing unintended consequences.
Correct. No,
I think it's worth doing the study.
I do
If it's
as
gonna
well.
be
And we
in-house-
need to look
If
at
we
the
can do it
numbers.
If we can
in-house.
do it in-house, that's all that much better.
I
And
agree.
it gives us a basis, if we have to say no to the people requesting,
Here's
we
why.
can cite this and say, this is telling us that it's really not,
Right.
it's not even legal to put a stop sign there. It may not, it may say it
Doesn't meet
is.
the criteria set up by the
Right.
agency.
Correct.
And that's where we're trying to let the village go ahead and do that, and then we'll figure out what the next process will be
I'm
once we
fi-
get
I'm
the
fine with
information
village-
back.
I'm fine with the village doing it in-house.
Okay. And, did you have something else?
No, I was just reflecting back. I know we were having difficulties finding the one from before on the mirror image. It was Cornell and Elm. I thought there was KLOA that had performed that study.
I would agree with that. I think you're right.
And the distance, they gave us the footage from the stop sign. If we put a stop sign at Cornell and Elm versus Ardmore, it was too close of a distance. And that's almost the exact same distance on the other side on the mirror image.
We can look again,
Yeah,
but we
it's-
weren't able to
yeah,
come up
I
with
was-
any
I'm almost positive it's
documentation from that the first
KLOM.
time.
Well, that one that came to us, somebody's car ended up on somebody's lawn at that intersection.
Yes.
And that was pretty serious, I think. We'll certainly worth our investigation. And we did. And I think ultimately, because the Warren study didn't back up anything, we left it as it is.
Kevin, how much staff time does this chew up?
With the traffic crash reports no longer being the huge time suck that they used to be, I would guess you probably have 4 to 6 hours on those per intersection. Traffic counters are fairly simple. It takes roughly an hour to put them out, 20 minutes to take them back in. Reviewing the data is probably the most time-consuming part there. As I mentioned before, the visibility question is fairly quickly determined one way or the other.
If any of the do we have to meet all of the criteria? Or
No.
How does that work?
That's left to engineering judgment, so, as the MUTCD refers to it. So, the MUTCD actually says that specifically it's not required that they meet all the warrants, and also says that meeting the warrants is not necessarily a warrant for always stop control. So I can't provide, unfortunately, a more specific answer on that.
I'm just wondering if there's a way to minimize some of the staff time, maybe by leaving the more staff time intensive stuff for last, and then if you see along the way that the first 4 are no good,
Well,
I would like to see a complete report.
you want to see it complete. Okay.
I would prefer it that way, just from a legal standpoint. If we're going to make a recommendation, we have a basis for it.
Fair enough.
And all the Ts are crossed and Is dotted.
I'm with you.
Okay, so we'll just leave, Bob, did you have something else?
No.
I didn't, okay. Why don't we just, we'll leave 902 stop signs at Elm and Princeton, along with 903 stop signs at Division in Princeton, since we kind of tied those both together at the same time as we're discussing. We'll wait to see what our engineering department comes up with, and then we can move forward. So they'll remain on our agendas, and
Chairperson Pincos, if I could, just one quick comment. Our traffic counters cannot be placed out in the snow. I realize we just passed Halloween, but given that we are now in November, there is always that chance. So just throwing out that could affect the schedule for providing results back to this commission if we get a snowstorm next week. But
Understood.
Do you expect to have answers for our December meeting?
assuming we are able to get those counters out between now and then, the December meeting is only 4 weeks away, so we have a limited amount of time. Typically, we put them out for at least a full 3 days, if not 5. So we'd like to give it the attention it's
Do you
due.
expect to come back to us in December?
I hope to.
Okay.
I hope to. I would say this, my plan would be if we are not able to complete it at both, that we at least prioritize Division and Princeton, given that that was the intersection where there was actually a confirmed incident with the bicycle in the car.
Fair enough.
I'll go with that.
Okay. Sounds good. Was just thinking about the counters. Okay. All right. We'll move on to item number 904, Traffic and Safety Commission's 2025 budget. Yes, Bob?
I happened to be in the village manager's office this afternoon, and he said that the budget that was presented was accepted without any changes. So that's, given, and we're going to assume that the village board approves it, that increased budget would be approved for next year.
Sounds good.
And it is on the village budget right now, the proposed budget at 2,500.
Okay.
Is
So-
that, that's the entire budget? Are we doing signs again, that kind of thing? Is that our plan?
Whatever we choose to do. The idea was, though, that we
Get somebody to come help
to
Kevin.
help Kevin, yeah.
Poor Kevin.
Poor Kevin. He's
Oh, Trish,
overworked
you
and
seem pretty good with a pen.
I feel like the sympathy tonight might actually be a little too much,
I
but
think he's blushing.
That gives Kevin something to do while he's here.
Otherwise, you gotta go home for the wife.
All right, so we'll leave this on until it's been officially approved. Moving on to item number 905, pedestrian signage and high visibility crosswalks at St. Charles and Ardmore. Any comments?
I can follow up on the commission's request of me from the last meeting, which was that I look into the feasibility and enforceability of adding no right turn on red restrictions, whether that be no right turn on red anytime, or whether it be no right turn on red when pedestrians are present. I can confirm that in conversation with our police department and also review of the state statutes, there is no requirement that, no state requirement that a motorist yield to a pedestrian on the sidewalk, so in other words, out of the pavement, out of the crosswalk, before making a right turn on red. So no right turn when pedestrians are present is not codified in state law in any way.
You were right. I looked it up too. I found it.
But we could,
So just to build on that, though, unfortunately, and I admit I'm less confident on this than I am on the first statement, but my interpretation is that no right turn on red when pedestrians are present is neither feasible nor enforceable, unfortunately. A couple reasons. It's, again, because it's not codified in state law. The village, as a local municipality, cannot write tickets against moving violations that it ordinances itself, is what I have been informed.
okay?
Moving violation citations can only be written against state statutes, which this is not.
And this is because we're not home rule.
I didn't clarify whether it was a home rule versus non, because that wasn't, okay, if that's the case, then
Chicago has those signs.
there's a lot of places that have them that are not home rule though, so I don't know if
They
it's.
probably put them up, just don't enforce them.
It could be, or they try and give people
I
tickets and
think
can't
that-
back them up, I don't know.
I think that if we put the sign up without ordinance or enforcement, it will create confusion.
And that is actually the second part, which is that the Federal Highway Administration, I believe their language was, encourages against the use of those signs as they're not approved in the MUTCD, and the language when pedestrians are present is not clear to motorists, is the official determination letter from FHWA.
That seems surprising to me because so many of the school zone restrictions include when children are present.
The signs for school zones say 20 miles per hour during school days when, or, I think it's, or, is it or when, and when children are present. That's it. And that, I don't even know how enforceable that is, but that is how the signs always read. So it would be either school days or when children are present, or school days when children are present.
Yeah, I guess just a little bit of additional information. State statute does codify that the school zones are in effect between the hours of 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. State statute actually does list those hours, which is perhaps the state's way of getting around the question of the language not being clear. I don't have a good answer for that one, but
That's fine.
I can't argue.
So in the end,
Most
you're
people
saying
ignore it
that
anyway.
you don't think we could do anything at this point?
So, in terms of things that can be implemented in the short term, there is still the option of adding no right turn on red, period. That is something that the village could enact by ordinance. That is something that is allowed under state statute and would constitute a moving violation under state statute. It would obviously require an ordinance adopted by the village board and presumably supported with a recommendation by traffic and safety. In terms of other material changes, I realized there was pushback on the signs that staff had proposed previously. We
But they're not
can,
enforceable anyway.
it's
Those
a,
signs were kind of confusing. I didn't like them.
and if that's the consensus, there's no need for us to put them up. The intent of the signs, at least in the MUTCD, is they are a gentle reminder of what is already in state law. I understand Commission's concerns that they aren't really going to have much of an effect on traffic out there. So,
I think if we turn it into no turn on red, it'll cause more backups at that intersection. That's what I think. It's a pretty busy intersection, and, you do have the multiple lanes, so that does clear some traffic that way.
so I should also clarify, I did not get far enough along in that process to determine whether or not the MUTCD has criteria for no right turn on red signs and ordinances. Figured I'd have the conversation with all of you first before looking into that. Since we don't have any existing in town, we've not had to encounter that before and determine if there's any sort of warrant study or criteria that must be met for those.
We don't have anywhere in town?
No, there are no right turn on red signs anywhere in the village.
Okay, so as the law is written, if it's not posted, you can make that turn on red.
As long as you follow all the other
Follow the other
requirements.
criteria. You must make a complete stop, you must wait for pedestrian traffic to clear that's already in the walkway, and you yield the right-of-way to other traffic. I believe even bicycles count on that. I can't remember if I saw that or not.
I would imagine that cyclists who are in a lane that would otherwise require a motor vehicle to be yielded to would also require them to be yielded to, yes.
And you also have to yield to people making a U-turn on a green arrow.
I did not read that.
I saw that
But-
somewhere.
Really?
Yes. I
Sorry,
did
what
see
you said,
that.
Carl.
A vehicle making a U-turn on a green arrow, you as a right turner would have to yield to that. I saw that somewhere and I don't remember. Pardon?
North Avenue has it somewhere.
Does it?
That's where I've seen it too.
Okay, but I believe I saw it in my research for the right turn on red. So like, as a right turn on red vehicle, you are the last in line for right of way.
Bob, you can correct me too, isn't any bicycle that's in the street has to obey the vehicle laws and vice versa?
Bicycles that are in the street have to obey traffic laws, right?
Right, and I would think it's vice versa in reference to cars following behind or wherever they are.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that's correct. If there was a eastbound bicycle on the right lane on St. Charles Road, and they're approaching, I would think that the car attempting to make a right-hand turn off of Ardmore would have to yield to the bicyclist.
Okay.
That's kind of what I got from what I looked at.
Okay. So, I'm not in favor of putting no turn on red.
I'm not either.
I'm not either.
Neither am I.
I would vote no on that.
Okay.
If we want to put it, if you want to make a motion and do it, Tricia, please do, but
It's already pretty clear that that's a waste of time.
I'm sorry, it's just, it's
Okay.
not a situation where I would go
But
there.
if I am correct, Kevin, you have restriped that area. And it looked, very good one night or something with the reflective.
I apologize. That had been on my list to send an email out to commissioners. I figured as time went on, most of you had already seen it yourselves. But yes, that was restriped with high visibility striping in October.
Right, so, okay.
I would like, though, that when the Ardmore project moves along to that area, that we look at that a little closer for that and maybe go with a right turn arrow or something that can be canceled out by somebody trying to cross or.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with having our consultant take a much closer,
Yeah.
much more comprehensive look at the intersection in general. Staff has some ideas I would welcome, whether it's the commission officially discussing and offering suggestions or even just providing email suggestions, we will take those as well. There will be a public comment, an official public comment period as well, as a part of the upcoming project.
Will we be involved as a commission with the Ardmore project as it moves forward?
So the commission will certainly receive invitations to the public meetings. The commission, at its choosing, may also, again, have formal discussion and/or agenda items to, to bounce ideas off of each other. And
Would you be willing to give us an update as it goes along?
of course,
Because that's how it's worked in the past,
Yeah.
where,
Okay. I would highly recommend that either commissioners attend the initial public meeting. That's typically when the project is still as close to a blank slate as it's going to be, and where those comments and suggestions have as much, have more weight than they will at any other point during the process.
is this coming soon?
This project unfortunately also was held up by IDOT with bureaucratic roadblocks for months. Finally, again, moving forward with a targeted date of taking an agreement to the village board in December to move forward with a full Phase 1 study for the entire corridor from Roosevelt to North Avenue.
And is that when the meeting will be, or?
The meeting would be sometime after that. There has to be at least some amount of time for exhibits and things like that to be prepared. That said, though, there's nothing stopping anybody here from reaching out to me with comments or ideas on that. In the meantime, I am actively feeding things to our consultant as they prepare this proposed agreement for things that we would like them to look at.
I would like to attend this, but my work schedule is very difficult, and usually these things are before I can possibly be there.
Well,
I'd like to go, but
I can't say yet what time it would be. But even if people can't attend, there is still a public input process that people are more than welcome, actually encouraged to
I
participate.
I would appreciate if you could give me a heads up when the
Sure.
meeting would be.
I will give the commission as much advance
All of
notice.
us, yes.
Is there a video of that presentation, that meeting?
I would say probably not. It's typically held as an open house format where staff is available, consultant representatives are available. There's typically as many as a few dozen boards with exhibits on them for people to peruse and offer comments on. We found in the past that that seems to work a little bit better than a structured agenda.
As other towns and the state does, you do have these presentations. In phase one, they seem to have some PowerPoints that they put up on their sites. Could we have a PowerPoint that might be put up by the village in reference to that?
We can certainly have the consultant put something together. We, again, on these past meetings, have typically made the exhibits publicly available on the website. But adding a PowerPoint presentation, I don't think would be too much additional effort.
All right, going back to item 905, are we in favor of closing this item?
I motion to close the item.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, closed. Item 906, crosswalk across Ardmore Avenue near Lufkin Pool, Park. Not pool, but park.
I know.
You have a comment?
I made you terrible illustrations.
Actually, these are pretty nice.
Thank you. I did them in MS Paint.
I can't find it.
You don't have a terrible illustration page? Here, you can look. Oh, you do. It's right here.
Oh, it's underneath my,
It's a
underneath
terrible.
my thing.
It's a terrible illustration page. Okay, so I would like to say it is irresponsible and foolish to make a plan that requires people to behave in a way that people do not behave. So, just saying people should walk up the hill and cross at Jackson to go to Lufkin Pool is irresponsible and foolish. People will not do that. We know that people will not do that. That is not a good plan. Just saying vehicles accelerating out of the stop sign and going down the hill from Jackson towards Lufkin Pool should drive the speed limit is irresponsible and foolish because we already know that people are going to speed, accelerating out of the stop sign and going down a hill. People are going to speed. So I propose that we actually do something physical, not just putting in some stripes to be like, there might be pedestrians walking here, but actually pinching the roadway so that it is narrowed down so that the lanes of travel are 11 feet wide, the same way that's required for a lane of travel at a 25 mile per hour speed limit, that we narrow the lanes so that people drive 25 and pedestrians can cross safely. And I don't really care how we do that, so I made several different terribly illustrated options about how that could be done. But really just leaving a 38-foot wide roadway and putting some stripes across as a crosswalk is not going to make pedestrians safer. It's not any safer than just putting up some signs that say, hey, try not to run pedestrians over because there will be children here. We need to make it easy for people to follow the speed limit.
Any further comments?
Would you elaborate on what each of these actions is?
Sure, I can talk about it. So I just measured the roadway on Google Maps with the little like left click to measure tool, and it says it's 38 feet wide. So if we put in a 5-foot bike lane and a 3-foot buffer, and then a lane of travel, and then another lane of travel for motor vehicles, and a 3-foot buffer and a 5-foot bike lane, then we have exactly our 38 feet. And we could do that, quite frankly, as far as I'm concerned, all the way down between Jackson and Riordan. That would make me perfectly happy. Jackson. I'm sorry, I always mix up the street names. Okay, between Jackson and Reard. We could do that for a long ways. That'd be fine. Another option would be to pinch the roadways with, they call them Jersey barriers. They're the ones that you see when they're doing road construction that are sort of like, they're wider at the bottom and then skinnier at the top. And they're just made out of concrete and they're about waist high. You could put those to like delineate the sides of the road. And so like it's not driving between the curb and the Jersey barrier, and then there is yes the road for yes driving, and that's your 11 feet. I think I drew it actually 12 feet for each lane in my suggestion number 2 illustration. Okay, and then suggestion number 3 is you can pinch motor vehicle travel lanes just like a tiny little bit with paint at the curb side, and then put in a pedestrian island in the middle, protected, however you want. We could put in flex posts or just like parking curbs or whatever. Just something that like literally physically pinches the roadway so that people can do a better job of following the speed limit.
Are you talking about these as temporary, permanent, or?
Well, they would of course be temporary.
Right, because we have
Because
a
we're
master
doing,
plan.
yeah, we're doing the huge whole stretch of Ardmore plan. And so this will obviously be covered in like a really professional, excellent way as part of the redoing Ardmore plan. But we're not redoing Ardmore until at least 2026. So this is, 2 summers worth of safety for people using Lufkin Park.
Okay, may I ask a question now?
Sure.
When you bring up the bike lanes,
Uh-huh.
this one with the Jersey barriers,
Uh-huh.
there's no bike lanes.
So the way that I drew it has space for bikes to be able to go like to the right side of the barrier as you're driving or as you're riding your bike. There's still space for you on the roadway to the right side of the barrier. So the cyclist could either be in the lane of traffic in this 11-foot wide lane of traffic, or if they felt more comfortable, they could stay close to the curb and go to the right side of the barriers.
I'm a little concerned about the junk that gathers behind this and.
Can I ask, if you put in Jersey barriers, how do people get into their driveways?
There's space to, like, I'm not proposing that we pinch the roadway the entire way down Ardmore with the Jersey barriers, just around the crosswalk, right? So pinch the roadway where the crosswalks are located.
Typically, they will do that in different places and villages for the suggestion number 2 with the Jersey barriers as it's being put here. Usually anywhere from 24 to possibly 36 feet on either side
Of the crosswalk?
of the crosswalk, because the Jersey barriers are typically 12 and a half feet wide or 12 and a half feet long. So, and their width is typically somewhere around
2 feet?
close to 2 feet. Yes. Yes, Bob?
I like what Commissioner Little has suggested. I appreciate the work you did on this.
Actually, I like it.
There are some sections of Ardmore on the east side of the street where there is some striping that kind of narrows the road, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's for
for example,
parking,
right
yeah?
there.
That's
I would call
correct.
that- I would call that narrowing of the roadway. I'm not sure if it's there because their mailboxes are on Ardmore or for whatever reason, the roadway is narrowed.
Yeah, that striping denotes the parking lane that's
Okay,
permitted on the
parking lane,
east side of Ardmore.
Speak on the subject.
Okay.
Is there a reason why, at the all-way intersection at Jackson and Ardmore, why there's not a crossing on the south side?
In all honesty, it was just never put in back when those sidewalks were constructed. That's something else that staff intends to look at as a part of this upcoming Ardmore Avenue
I mean,
project.
I spent a lot of time in the past few weeks over there. Matter of fact, I've got to meet quite a few of the neighbors walking their dogs and stuff, out there with a tape measure and kind of measuring and things. Yeah, because right now, they have to go north, they have to cross traffic 3 times to get to the other side of the street. They have to cross, the west side of Jackson, they have to cross Ardmore, then they have to cross the east side of Jackson. The distance from the very center of the park or the center of the building to where there would be a crosswalk on the south side of Jackson versus putting where there would be a crosswalk at Van Buren is roughly a difference of about 20 feet. Okay, I'm not counting the parking lot, I'm talking about the very center of the building.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Okay, if you're at the very center of the building, at the very center of the park, okay, the distance from that center to where the crosswalk or where the sidewalk would be to cross Jackson is just short of 200 feet. And if you take it from the side of the building going south to put a crosswalk at Van Buren, is about 228 feet. It's right around in there. I was just measuring it off the sections of the sidewalk, which there are a few cracked sections. Anyhow, I definitely think it would be feasible for us to consider putting a crosswalk in on the south side, so at least the kids only have to cross traffic once at a protected intersection.
South side being Van Buren?
No, south
at
side of Jackson, because it's only on 3 sides of it. The south side, that'd give them one option where they only have to cross Ardmore once to get to the other side.
But no kid is going to go up the hill to cross at the protected intersection. That's not what they're gonna do.
If you're going to, as I'm continuing here, I mean, I'll for protecting this somehow. I do see the park is geared for younger children, very younger children type of equipment that's in there, the kind of pair.
Sure.
Children that should be, accompanied by parents, guardians, babysitters, older siblings and stuff, but we know that due to pictures, that's not gonna happen. Putting the distance from Van Buren to there is about 400 feet. I'm afraid if we put something in the hill, right in the middle, you're going to have somebody accelerating downhill, and from there to the center of the park, they're already up to 22, 23 miles an hour. And unfortunately, we live in a world where everybody assumes that pedestrians always have the right of way, which is not true. I've done a bunch of Google searching on that, and generally, pedestrians have the right of way in protected crosswalks and intersections. That's a real gray area. And you've got kids that are gonna just walk right out in front of a moving car. And I mean, even like today, Ardmore, I went past there at 10 o'clock this morning, Ardmore is covered full of leaves and it's wet. That's slippery. You're gonna have a kid step out in front of a car of 4,000 pounds worth of kinetic energy trying to come to a quick stop. As kids are, he better not hit me. I'm a pedestrian mentality. And we can see that even with adults. Go to Ville Oak Shopping Center. 6 out of every 9 people will step out in front of a moving vehicle. Granted, in parking lots like that, they're only moving 5 or 8 miles an hour. Go to Walmart. 9 out of every 10 people step out in front of a moving vehicle. Go over here to Ardmore at where we have our flashing lights. 50% of the adults jogging, running, or running a bicycle don't press the flashing signs, and they're wearing dark clothes. And of course, it's dark at 5 o'clock in the evening right now. I want to protect them somehow, and I feel we do need some type of protection. But I think putting a crosswalk right that close to that intersection downhill we might be causing additional problems.
At Van Buren?
Well, right straight in front. Now, if you go down to Van Buren, we would actually, to put a crosswalk in where it belongs, we're gonna have to move a light post. Actually, the light post is leaning anyhow. There's a fire hydrant light post, and I think somebody's got one of our, or there's a political sign or something right now.
There's a mailbox, a fire hydrant, and a light pole.
Yeah, that light pole's leaning.
There's a
And
utility
then we
box.
also have
Moved.
I
we
think
have
there's
a
also
street sign.
Electronic box of some
Right.
sort.
We have,
South side's open.
in the south side, we do have a street sign, but we have to move it back a little bit. But you made a measurement from going south of that
Going south,
building.
it's like 228, it's about 200 feet going south to Van Buren. It's like 228 going up to Jackson. It's within like 20, 25 feet area, somewhere in there.
Now, going south, was that on the north side of Van Buren, or was that on the south?
That'd be on the north side of Van Buren.
And we would have to, if
Move
you
a light
looked at it,
Right.
that's
One of my thoughts, I like, heard a demonstration of narrowing, putting, pinching that off, and maybe reducing the speed limit sign, are we able to reduce the speed just for that block or two? Maybe food for thought. Or would the park district be able to put a decorative wood fence across there, which would stop kids from wanting to cross straight across the street? They'd have to go to one of the corners for a crosswalk. A nice decorative
Okay,
wood fence.
to
with some
be
posts.
clear, talking with Kevin before the meeting, and there is not presumed to be a pedestrian crossing at an intersection that the sidewalk doesn't go towards the street. So there is not presumed to be a pedestrian crossing anywhere between Jackson and Riordan on the south side of Willowbrook High School. There's not a pedestrian crossing at High Ridge. There's not a pedestrian crossing currently at Congress. There's not a pedestrian crossing currently at Van Buren. There are no pedestrian crossings on that whole stretch. And it is irresponsible and foolish to have a plan that requires people to behave in a way we know people do not behave. People will cross Ardmore Avenue. They will do it between Riordan and
Okay,
Jackson.
We brought
So-
that up once before,
so-
years ago, about there's lack of crossings from Riordan. It's in the south side of Riordan, actually.
Yes.
It's not even in the north side to Jackson. And this was brought up some years ago. It's like, okay, so none of these kids that go to Willowbrook High School live on the east side of Ardmore. Okay, well, they're all breaking the law, they're jaywalking, they're crossing. I totally get that. This has been brought up before.
Right. So we have the opportunity to do something that makes it more accessible for people who are not inside motor vehicles. And I think that we should do something. And I think the something we should do is more than putting up a sign and more than putting down paint.
What I'm looking at here
Okay,
is,
okay, let's stop for a second, because it seems like we're all over the place. Tricia?
Yes.
What are you proposing to do?
I
I
want
want exactly, not just,
I want to narrow the roadway. I am not an engineer.
Okay,
I'm not an
so you
engineer,
want-
so I don't know what we are allowed to do.
I understand it.
I'm not,
just propose what you're looking at is you would like to narrow the road with something of your three illustrations that are
right.
here.
I want to narrow the roadway and put in a pedestrian crossing at a minimum at Van Buren, but actually I'd like to do it at Van Buren, Congress, and High Ridge. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to narrow the roadway and put in pedestrian crossings at those three intersections where a street coming from the east intersects Ardmore Avenue. That's what I want to do.
Okay,
So for each of those
I think I
streets
still
you
have the
wanna
floor on
cross.
this one.
okay, now we're gonna go to you,
Okay.
all right?
I'm actually all for we definitely need more crossings between there and Willowbrook High School.
Okay.
Definitely. I think putting one right in front of the park is a little bit irresponsible that close to the stop sign going downhill.
Great.
I
I'm
would like-
proposing at Van Buren.
I still have the floor.
Wait.
Sorry,
let-
I'm
let-
sorry.
Let him say his,
Okay, I just think we need to look at the bigger picture rather than, we need to definitely put in a crosswalk at Jackson. We need to look into something a little bit farther down the road. But putting one dead square on a downhill slope right in front I think is irresponsible because people are gonna do as people do. And the only thought I could have is maybe putting some kind of a decorative wood fence, kind of a rustic fence in front of there, put a sign on there saying use the crosswalks, and they're gonna have to walk to one of the corners. And it's not, like I say, it's only like 20, 25 feet difference between going down to Van Buren versus Jackson. But we definitely need to do something at Jackson. Okay, go ahead.
okay. Joe,
All right, I like some of the concepts here. I do like the central island. I like the idea of the bike lanes, but even though I like those ideas, first of all, I would say the bike lanes should go to the bike subcommittee to make sure that they're within what they're looking for. But this is all gonna get wrapped up in the Ardmore project, and it should certainly be considered as part of that. I do not like the idea of the Jersey barriers. I think they look awful. I understand the idea, and if we had something similar that maybe looked okay, I could talk about it, but I think at a minimum, though, what we can do on a short-term basis is, and obviously this would be in the spring, would be put a crosswalk on the north side of Van Buren intersection. And I would want to put one of those little signs that go in the middle of the roadway that say "Stop for pedestrians." They had them out by the Prairie Path for a while. In fact, if you go to Elmhurst, they're still at the Prairie Path. I think the Lombard Center uses that same kind of setup in front of their place. As a short-term thing, I think that would work and that would solve the problem temporarily. I'm not quite, I understand what you're saying about going to Jackson, but kids coming off of Van Buren aren't doing that, period. They're just not. So that's why I want to do it at Van Buren. Streets from the south of Van Buren can come up to Van Buren and cross right at the park. So the kids are going to be more likely to do that than go all the way to Jackson. As far as people accelerating down a hill and all that, what if there's somebody crossing the street? I mean, they're just going to run them over? What? Crosswalk or no crosswalk, the kids aren't going to pay attention. The crosswalks, I think, more for drivers than anybody. Because the kids are just going to do what they're going to do. If we at least funnel them into one spot, I think you give better notification to the drivers that are coming down that, hey, this is an area that this is going to happen. So as far as I appreciate all the work you did on this, Tricia, and I like a lot of this, the ideas, but this needs to be considered, I think, in a master plan, much more so that we don't do one thing and then have to change it. But the crosswalk thing, I think, is a simple fix that we can do. It's inexpensive, and I think it's low risk.
I disagree with that.
Okay.
When you have that long stretch there like that, where there's no traffic controls from High Ridge to Jackson, putting a crosswalk in the middle of there, even if you do have the stop in the middle of the street, I wouldn't even call it a controlled intersection.
It's not.
Exactly.
That
And when you have a crosswalk where you're directing children to go, or younger individuals go there, you're maybe creating a false sense of security. So is this really where we want to go? And particularly with this big plan coming on, I mean, I would like to see something a little more temporary, even if it's just lineage on the sides of the road, which create the impression of a narrower street, which is one of the things the MUTCD does recommend as a traffic calming effect. Now, how far do we want to go before this project? How much money are we going to put into this when we know it's going to get torn up in the near future?
I agree.
And we do have to find a more permanent solution. If there's a crosswalk again, I can't say this enough. I just don't want to create a false sense of security.
Bob, you haven't said anything. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I'm interested in the pedestrian refuge island. I guess my question to Kevin would be, what's the approximate cost for pedestrian refuge island? I mean, what does the MUTCD see about those? Would they have to be associated with an intersection?
I'll be honest, I'm not experienced enough with these to provide feedback. I would need to do some more research and try and get back to the commission on that.
Okay.
I think just off the top, it would have to be like a barrier island in there with 88 going across it. They have that at where is it, Lombard at the it's the Great Western.
Oh, right by St. Charles? That's the Great Western, yes.
It's the Prairie Path there.
And it doesn't have to be done like everybody is well aware that this is temporary, right? We're doing the big project in a couple of years. It can be designed in a temporary way. I've seen, instead of pouring cement, I've seen the parking lot blocks. You know what I'm talking about. When you pull into the parking lot, it's got the, right. Instead of pouring cement, they've used parking lot blocks to create, and paint to create that pedestrian refuge island, right? It's enough that if you hit it with your car, you're going to jack up your alignment. So it's enough to slow people down.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, I like the Jersey barriers better, but I understand they are ugly as sin.
Ugly.
Some people paint them. That's pretty cute.
I'm not sure the homeowners over there are gonna agree with that.
Understood.
But as a temporary thing, I can see that, but
Okay. The situation that we have here is we're trying to put a crosswalk in the most logical place to put it, where everybody wants to go ahead and put it, is at, what's the street down there?
Van Buren.
Van Buren. However, it would have to probably be on, the south side of the intersection, south of Van Buren.
and
Don't make it farther than Jackson then.
how
Okay.
far of a walk is that?
Okay, well, the problem is, and I'm sure once, if you brought it to the village and everything else, one, you have to have, what was it, the ComEd poles in the way there for the light?
There are more physical obstacles on the north side of the intersection, north side of Van Buren than there are on the south side. Not necessarily insurmountable, but just more obstacles.
And then you also have the fire hydrant in reference to it.
Fire hydrant's farther enough north. The only obstacle would be the light post, and the light post is leaning severely to the east, which it needs to be probably moved or rearranged. But it is a light pole, and it does light up that intersection, which would be a
benefit.
benefit.
Okay. And just if you're trying to move the light pole, it'll probably take you 2 years to get it moved.
True story.
With ComEd. Just knowing
That's a
what
comment
ComEd.
poll.
I know you have a couple of questions, however, the public is not supposed to make any comments at the moment for this, so I'm not ignoring you, I see you there.
There was just one thing that Jack had talked about, putting up a fence. There is a covenant that you cannot put up a fence at Lufkin.
Oh,
Is that part of the property acquisition?
That was part of the.
Even on the
document. It was
parkway?
on the Parks and Recreation Committee, and there were like, 6 things, and just before you got too deep, I just wanted to let you know about that.
what if that
It
applies to
could
the
be
parkway
any-
also, because it's versus the park property?
It was just Lufkin, when
Okay,
the
I'm-
documents, I don't know what the.
I'm just trying to see so we can
parameters were.
deter kids from
It
going
was
straight
like-
across the street at
Some
that
of the
point.
things were like no boisterous, it couldn't be this, it couldn't be that, and one of the things was no fencing.
Okay. Hey, Jay, may I speak?
And I think you'd get a lot of pushback from Parks and Rec after, because it's aesthetically beautiful to put a
Yeah.
barrier.
Well, I'm not talking about a barrier, I'm talking about like the wood post, kind of rustic fence with a
Yeah,
couple of
but
posts
there is
across.
no-
It is actually park looking. There's a lot of parks that have fences like that. I'm just trying to deter the kids from going straight across right in front of the park.
Jack, they don't go straight across.
Yeah, I know, they go wherever they want.
Well, no, but I mean, they're actually, the majority of them seem to be crossing at Van Buren.
That is on the radius.
Okay.
This is
Because
where
they're
it
coming
should
from-
be going.
Oh, you're the one.
Ardmore off of Van Buren.
I just wanted to let you, before you got too deep into that.
I think we put challenging to squeeze it
For
in.
consideration.
That's the way I was just looking at it. And if you go on this side, you have to get on the other side of that because you can't do it there. Okay. So,
I wanted to speak one more thing real briefly, actually, I like Trish's idea of narrowing this, maybe just some stripage, to try to, there'd be a kind of a temporary fix to kind of give them aware that there's a park here or something, if we narrowed it a little bit with some yellow striping from the curb, like one of her designs here. Over here. Not necessarily put a crosswalk in, but at least it would slow and calm traffic a little bit.
okay.
All right. I guess nobody's disagreeing there needs to be some type of crosswalk or something to improve that.
Yeah, this is,
Okay?
that's just a political sign. The fire hydrant's way over there. It's just that light post right there.
That light post,
But
okay?
that thing's leaning and about ready to,
I'm just telling you, it'll take about 2 years to get that, because you have to, and I deal with it all the time.
yeah.
I have a saw.
The way it's leaning, it'll probably come down on
Come
its
by
own.
morning.
But just looking at it, there is more to it in reference to it. I mean, trying to do the striping and everything else, that's fine. We're talking about striping, but the key is where you can, we need to put walks in there coming off of the north-south sidewalks that are in there. You have to have ADA ramps in there. I'm not sure what the best situation would be, but I will tell you it will be somewhat costly. And I don't know if the village will be willing to spend that much money in order to, something that's 2 years down the road in reference to the project. But, I mean, if we were looking at it, you'd have to have some type of study. Even on, as we looked at the south side of Van Buren, there are drainage structures in the way of putting sidewalks in. And that will cause problems too. So I want to say it would probably be a very, I'm going to say probably be somewhere over $10,000 to do this work.
Which one?
Pardon me?
Which one? Any of them, all of them?
Just to get the sidewalks in.
Get the sidewalks in.
Sidewalks in, get things moved around, and,
Just for that intersection at
Yes.
Van Buren?
yeah.
Just like from the sidewalk to the roadway.
Sidewalk to the road, because you gotta take out,
Right.
there are curbs you have to remove, you have to get the ADA ramps in there, and
Even
slope
if,
those.
even if it's a temporary build.
Yes.
Well, yeah, if we.
But
if we put a
that would be
crosswalk in,
something
it's-
that Kevin might be able to answer if a temporary would be there, but you're still liable for any incidents that happen once you start to do that. So if you're not doing it per,
Yeah, unfortunately, there is no provision in ADA for temporary measures. If we put it in, it has to be ADA compliant. I think the $10,000 might actually be a little light, but that's just very rough numbers.
I mean, that's just looking at trying to get the sidewalk in. there.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Would it be possible just for some yellow stripage like Trish's picture here? I think it's a really nice idea of, narrowing it. It kind of gives kids I would hate to have them step off the curb, but it does give a little space for air, and it would give a calming effect for people driving. And it'd just be a matter of a couple of stripes.
What would,
I understand about what your stripes are, okay? But what is to the left and right of that street? It's grass,
Yeah.
okay?
There's a curb, isn't there?
Well, there's curb too,
curb,
yeah.
right.
Exactly. But
I'm just trying to find a calming thing to get people to be a little more
I
aware
don't,
that this goes on
and
here.
Kevin, you can verify this a little bit, but I don't think you can put a crosswalk across the street and stripe it if you don't have any sidewalks.
I'm talking about just side striping.
I don't think he's talking
not
about a crosswalk.
Sure.
I'm just talking about side striping to
That-
narrow
that
it.
traffic
to give a
calming effect is what he's
effect.
looking for.
That's all I'm looking for, is a couple of bright yellow stripes on each side that kind of narrows it down a little bit to just give it a calming effect. I'm not saying put a crosswalk in, because then you've got a false sense
And
of
then
security.
how far would you be doing that?
A good stretch across the distance of the park, that's all. It's just a warning that there's a park there, that's all.
I would say continue it from Jackson up
couple
to
of
the top
stripes.
of the hill.
Well, and then Kevin would have to check into to see what the, what do you call it, procedures are for all the striping that we have out there.
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't have an answer for you on what it would take to accomplish striping out there.
Because you have to get rid of the conflicting striping too, then.
Presumably, the striped parking lane would have to change in some way, yeah. But again, I don't want to speak too elaborately on it without having having looked into it a little further.
I mean, Kevin, as far as we're doing it right now, we're just assuming things, but if Kevin, I mean, obviously, you're just looking at, I don't know if we could go with suggestion number one with the bike lanes in reference to it.
Would we
because
have to change some, would we have to have some kind of
you could
ordinance to
not
do that?
Have just a short distance of a bike lane and then just leave it out? Go ahead, Bob.
That's my thought. So far as the Bike Pedestrian Transit Subcommittee is concerned, I would say that we are not experts on engineering for bike lanes, et cetera. I mean, we have general knowledge, but we don't, you know, we're not qualified to make a decision. I would say that if you're gonna make a bike lane, I'd like to see it go the whole distance of whatever, from
Right.
St. Charles to Roosevelt, or from, you know, from North Avenue to Roosevelt. You know, I'm in favor of putting bike lanes in wherever we can, but
So am I.
it seems to be a little bit a short distance. And I'm not sure how much protection that would afford for pedestrians by
Right.
putting a bike lane in.
Are you familiar, Bob, within the city in Chicago, they put in quite a few bike lanes? Now, when they do that, don't they have like little cones along the side of it as
They
well?
protected bike lanes, yes, yeah.
Okay.
They're doing more and more of them.
They
But
do-
I
they
would
do
say that would
curbs
be
and
too
flex
expensive for us to do at this stage of things with the big improvement coming.
Yeah.
But I don't see why, you know, even if they're just white lines, to give the impression that the street is narrow has a traffic calming effect. And if we look at, I don't know how many pedestrians are coming there, but I know that if they're coming from the north, they'll probably come along Jackson, cross at Jackson, and go down the street that way. If they're coming from further south, they'll probably cross at Reardon, where the stop signs are, and then come along the sidewalk there. There's nowhere to cross from at High Ridge, that's out. So you're talking about a small area of town, basically. Now, are there people coming from Roosevelt Road, or kids coming from Roosevelt Road and Brandywine? Possibly. They have their own parks and stuff, sure, but are they meeting friends from school there, that kind of thing? We have to look at where other traffic is coming from too, I think. But for the time being, I would support some kind of lineage through that area to give the impression that the street is narrower than it is. Now, the bike lanes, like she suggests here, I don't know, like Bob says, it would be more beneficial to have it all the way, but then
Well,
we're
you-
forgetting about the big picture.
Right. But the whole thing, what I'm trying to say with the bike lanes is to just go a block with the bike lanes is kind of like false security, and I would, like you said, it should be at this, even if it's from St. Charles Road to Roosevelt Road or something.
If we do bike lanes, it should go minimum of from Jackson to Riordan. And there's plenty of pavement to do it on, right? Without any big construction. I mean, we can do it with paint and flex posts, which are like $200 for 3 of them installed.
People have to
Then you
be
gotta
able
pay, and you gotta take them out when it's time to plow. So then it does no good done.
No, they leave those in,
Do they?
yeah.
So then what happens when they plow?
They don't plow the bike lane.
They don't plow the park.
And then it fills up with snow.
Right,
Does.
so.
You gotta buy a little mini plow to plow the bike lane.
Well, plus.
Some towns do that.
Some towns do
There's
that.
also
should
on-street
put an
parking
overpass.
on some of those areas.
If we do this, if we do striping for the short term, I could see that.
Well,
Or make it parking, and remember when, what's that, Oak Brook thing on Roosevelt, they used to have a police car just sitting there all the time.
Oh, yeah.
They had a dummy.
South side of Roosevelt Road, yeah.
Yeah, they used to have a dummy in it. If we made a parking lane there and put a unused police vehicle in there,
We can park the RV there.
okay.
just off so off.
Look, let's then, just,
I think we need to look into this more.
yes. I don't think it's a simple answer right now. The striping, the patterns of the striping that you have here, you obviously can't, at the moment, have crosswalks in it,
Sure.
okay? it's a question is, Kevin, can you look into the situation of what we can do with striping?
I will try and get more information on what's allowed and what's not, and the various hurdles to overcome with regard to those.
I would think we need to move forward, at least get going on another crosswalk at Jackson. How that isn't there.
Yeah, that should be there, yeah.
That's a given,
I
that's a
agree.
must.
That
I would
should-
agree with that.
And I totally agree with that, and I also, that spot there is a little bit easier to put that in. Again, the cost again is to get an ADA in there and get that all prepped with it. I'm trying to remember when we did that on Jackson, and I can't remember what the other.
Was it Lacey?
Lacey.
Leslie.
Oh, Leslie, yes.
It took us about almost 2 years to get that in,
Yeah.
so.
Well, that's about when we'll be looking at with the improvement, isn't it?
My other point that I'm kind of going with is, yes, the improvements would be coming at roughly that time too. So, Kevin, if you could check about the striping, I think that's the easiest and most logical way of doing anything at the moment. The rest, I think, is going to be out of the village's budget, that they definitely will not want to move with it. But let's take a look at the striping in reference to it. The striping, the way you have it here for like an island and stuff, I don't think that's gonna slow anybody down, just FYI, just knowing it. And in the city, what they're doing now, which is a nightmare for contractors, they're putting actually a curve down. That's the new way of doing it, is they're putting a curve all the way down on the sides, and they're making them 7 foot wide.
And that's your bike lane.
That's your bike lane. Now, how they plow it, I can't tell you what they do with that.
They have a machine. They bought a little small, 7 foot wide, little mini, drive it in the bike lane, snow machine,
Well,
snow plow.
And they've got the staff to handle it, and they're $1 billion in the whole other budget, so. I don't know if they're the best.
Understood.
So, but anyways, we'll have to see, and also to put the bike lanes in, you also have to have additional symbols and letters and symbols, I guess is the easiest way to say that. And those are not cheap either, so. So if you could look into that and we can move on. So, that I believe, we'll see what happens with, what Kevin comes back with for, December. Any other comments, or can we move on? Okay, let's move on. Item 9, new businesses. I believe we have nothing. Okay, item 10, commissioners' comments. Carl, I always like to start with the right, go to the left, so.
Okay. There's a very good chance I won't be here next month. You all realize that.
Right.
So just to get that out there. And then I have kind of a question for Bob. This morning I was crossing the Prairie Path at Monterey, and some, I would say, middle school kids, 2 on 1 and 1 on another, on electric bikes came zooming through there. Are electric bikes allowed on the Prairie Path?
Electric bikes are allowed on the Prairie Path.
Okay.
The question I have is about there's a Class 3, which can go faster.
It looked like a pretty beefy bike. I'm thinking they're
Yeah.
probably,
I mean, there are plenty of e-bikes. There's probably more and more e-bikes on the path.
so they haven't put anything in place to deal with that yet.
Elmhurst had a thing that they had posted, a graphic that they had posted, talking about the different classes of e-bikes. And if I remember right, either all of them are allowed on the Prairie Path, or all but the most capable,
The most powerful.
most powerful.
Would be a better word.
Now, those go in, I think, in, Bob, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but those go in excess of 20 miles an hour.
Wouldn't surprise me. I see people on the streets with those.
Under 20 miles an hour, the ones that are capable of going under 20 miles an hour only, I think I have no problem on the Prairie Path. But that can look quick. As far as a bike going 20 miles an hour down the Prairie Path, that can appear fast.
Well, I don't think they were going that fast, but again, they were, as I say, like middle school aged.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's appropriate either. I'm asking for information for my own benefit.
Yeah, I think the issue may be with class 3. With the
Right.
the e-bikes that can go faster.
Okay. Okay. I think that answers my question. Thank you. That's all I have.
But the question is, who's policing it?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Is it going to be the municipality? Is it going to be the county? Probably the county will say, you guys do it.
It's their property.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, they don't like.
And they like to let it be known that it's their property.
Yes.
Yes, they do.
And I do know DuPage County considers the bike paths part of their transportation system.
In what regard?
As if they look at lane miles in their county.
Okay.
I just learned that last week.
So then, in that respect, then it is, well, it probably is already, but it's their responsibility to maintain and keep it up then. All
Yes.
aspects of it.
Yes.
Police it.
So, 2 weeks ago, between, let's see, our west border on the Prairie Path to Ardmore, the county was out there dressing up the Prairie Path. I don't know exactly what they were doing. Looked like they were adding stone and some stuff, but yeah.
Well, that's nice.
So
There's a lot of places that get a little muddy and soggy when it rains.
Does DuPage County have like a traffic and safety board, like we have here in the town, or in the village?
not to my knowledge.
There's a transportation committee.
Oh, I'm just
That probably
picturing
fits.
something, maybe they actually need some kind of a patrol or policing of the prairie paths, which is separate than patrol cars. Because this is an upcoming thing, and every time we bring this up, it gets a little more and a little more and a little more. Somebody brought it up a few years ago, and we kind of laughed about it, and it's not a laughable item anymore.
Are we gonna have to put
And this is,
bike
you're
and
gonna almost
pedestrian
need
lanes
your
in?
own enforcement of, police enforcement of some kind for the prairie path. Something maybe somebody needs to wake them up a little bit and.
There's a lot of stuff that
poke
goes
with a
on
sharp
along the
stick a little
prairie
bit
path.
And say, this is an upcoming issue, we need to probably start looking into it.
Okay. All right. Tricia,
I got nothing, thanks.
Jack, did you say what you wanted to?
Yeah, I'm done whining, I feel much better. I feel much better. Thank you for listening, continue.
I just want to mention that we have 18 Drive Like Your Kids Play Here signs left
Wow.
at the police station.
I've seen some of those in Lombard, some of our signs.
Yeah,
Yes.
I put them brand new, but I was there last Friday, and their folks are still coming into the Villa Park Police Department picking them up. So,
I see more and more.
yeah.
Yes,
As I go around town, I see more and more.
saw one on Gray Street this morning.
And the ones probably in Lombard is probably because our school district goes over that, far over.
45 and
It's
88,
about
yeah.
Grace Street and stuff.
Which is fine, safety should be safety everywhere, doesn't matter within our boundaries.
I did pass along a link to the Village of Gurnee, their panhandler information page, who I thought was interesting, and how to discourage panhandling and why, county services are available to them, and since we did have a resident come and talk about that. And then I passed along the email about the second open house they're having on the DuPage County Safety Action Plan. That'll be on November 14th at 7 PM at Bensonville Library. And that's all I've got.
Joy?
Well, now I've got two things. Considering we're running so low on signs, do we want to be looking in the spring to do another batch?
I think that's a valid question.
How many signs did we order the last time?
200.
200.
Before that, the prior time was 100, but that was several years ago.
My question to Bob is, and Bob has been very active at getting these signs out to the residents and stuff. He, every time, has gone to a lot of these different events in our town, handing them out. You feel, I mean, I would say that's how the majority of them ended up getting out to our residents. They weren't really picking them up at the police station. Am I?
Yeah, I mean, when you make them available to people and say, you know, I've seen those, I want one, you know, Halloween happenings, the trick or trot, the D45 fun run, those are all good events for distributing signs.
So what I'm leading into is if we're thinking about doing this again, okay, obviously stay with the same design that we have, but I guess we would have to have a little more participation from our committee members instead of just having Bob going to all these events too, that we would be willing to commit to go to these events and help pass these out.
Next year, there's a very good possibility I will have more time for that sort of thing.
I'm just making that aware for everybody, because I just,
Well,
think it was
the
great
reason-
that Bob did that.
Yeah.
And it
Yes,
wasn't
thank
just
you,
me, it was
Bob.
the Bike Pedestrian and Transit
Part,
Subcommittee.
part of the reason I'm bringing it up now, though, is so that we don't start this in,
Late like we did last.
I'm suggesting we do this so that we can start actually earlier in the year when events start.
I think that's an excellent idea.
So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up today. We can, you know, however we want to revisit it going forward is fine. Whether we want to keep the same design, change colors, whatever, or do the same thing. And I agree with you. And part of that could also be, should we be thinking about, you know, Bob has a table at most of these events, or a tent at most of these events. Should we be doing the same thing as a commission?
Well, that's kind of what I'm throwing out there
Yeah.
right now, okay? So, I think we should bring this back up in reference to probably somewhere in February.
I say January.
I agree.
I say January.
Okay.
Obviously, December's tough, especially since I probably won't be
Do
here.
we have a list of these events and dates and times and things?
They
or-
should already have that in Park District and all that should have these events and
I would definitely like to be
Well,
involved
I'm
in
just
some of
thinking,
these.
most of the people that go to these events right now probably will not be taking them until probably March.
Right, but if we start in January, all the stuff that we did before, you know, how long it took to get those signs ordered and getting out, then we talk about it in January, we talk about it in February, we present ideas maybe in March or even in February.
Okay, we can talk about it.
Let me clarify a little bit. If the commission was to approve these signs, and they're in our budget, we could put them in the budget, it would literally take me 7 days on probably the outside to get them made and shipped.
So we want them by March, let's say.
February meeting, I can, if we were,
I'm just anticipating some discussion,
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
possibility of different viewpoints, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we went back and forth over this for a couple of months.
That's
which is
why
it took so-
I like the idea of
actual-
earlier.
Yes, yeah. The actual ordering of the signs is nothing.
Right.
It's
I'm
literally,
more concerned about what happens here.
yeah.
Okay. So, I guess what we really want to do then, make this an action item and make this item number 907,
Good.
so that we can bring it up and discuss it through these meetings coming up in the future here. And
That's good.
drive like you.
We need a motion in a second.
Okay.
And I have one more thing,
The same thing? Yeah. Okay, before we go any further, since we're discussing about this,
okay,
do we have a motion to do,
we can't do that. It's not on our agenda.
To create a new item for the Drive Like Your
okay,
Kids
all right.
Live Here
Yes.
signs for the
I'll make
next one.
motion to create the agenda item.
D. Tomaso,
I'll second.
Wagner, second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. So, that covers that. What else, Joe?
One last thing, I want to congratulate Tricia. She became a citizen.
I did. I got my citizenship in October.
Congratulations.
I thought you were born here. Where
Oh no, I'm Canadian.
Oh, no.
Canadian, yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations.
I got to vote for the first time. It was very exciting. I hope
there you go.
everybody voted.
It's fantastic, too.
Okay. Swinging back to me now. Bob has noted that, made me aware of, I guess is the best way, that there's actually a village manual out there for all these different commissions. And I believe you can, I'm gonna turn it over to you because you know the exact website to look at it. But there is, for all our commissions, I'd like everybody to look through this and read through it, just so that we're all in, following the rules that the village has come up with, or a manual that,
Is this a
how we
new,
should act.
is this a new thing?
It's Commissioner
No, the.
Yes.
Commissioner handbook, and it was approved, the final draft was approved by the village board. And it gives a brief description of each board and commission, and then it covers things like Robert's Rules of Order, budget, minute taking, agendas, etc. So it's a good document to be familiar with.
So would you email that address for that, or do we just go through the village?
Kevin, we can email that out, can we not? Okay.
We can. I did want to clarify that I received a version that's still stamped as a draft. I wanted to make sure that there is in fact a final for public consumption version out there.
I am
I'll go with
almost certain the
Okay.
village board approved that.
Okay, I will.
Well, just wait it out
Wait, Bob,
anyway.
follow
It's
up.
not,
In the document center.
it's not a, there's not a rush on it, I'm thinking.
Okay, but either way, we'll research it and get it out to us.
Yeah, ideally, ideally, they should be emailing it to all the commissioners
That would be,
out of the manager's office, not just us, but
But anyways, that's there. So, that's basically all I have to say at the moment. I do have one other thing. Please remember that your mics are live. They pick up everything. So we'd like to, if you are gonna talk amongst commissioners, make sure you are muting your mic so that it's not interrupting our telecast in reference to that. And that's all I have. Kevin, we'll just jump down right to Kevin. Do you have anything?
I have nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, so do we have a motion to end? Bob?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'll
Do I go
second.
first?
Okay.
Tricia, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, thank you.
thank you.